Tales from India 2. Lawsuit in the Light. One day, the darkness noticed that the light was taking up more and more of its space and decided to sue it. Some time later, the day set for the trial arrived. The light appeared in the courtroom before the darkness did. The respective lawyers and the judge arrived. Time passed, but the darkness did not appear. Everyone waited patiently, but the darkness did not appear. Finally, the judge, fed up and seeing that the plaintiff did not appear, ruled in favor of the light. What had happened? How was it possible that darkness had filed a lawsuit and not shown up? No one could be astonished, although the explanation was simple. The darkness was outside the room, but it did not dare to enter because it knew that it would be immediately dispelled by the light. The Master says, "Light is consciousness and wisdom, while darkness is obfuscation and narrow-mindedness. If you establish yourself in wisdom, is there room for obfuscation? The truth, is it the truth?" The king had been in a state of deep reflection for the past few days. He was pensive and absent-minded. He asked himself many questions, including why human beings were not better. Unable to resolve this last question, he asked for a hermit who lived in a nearby forest and who had been a meditator for years and had gained a reputation for wisdom and even temperedness to be brought to him. Only at the request of the king did the hermit leave the vast peace of the forest. "My lord, what do you want from me?" he asked the pensive monarch. "I have heard much about you," said the king. "I know that you hardly speak, that you do not like honors or pleasures, that you do not differentiate between a lump of gold and a lump of clay, but everyone says that you are a wise man." "People say, sir," replied the hermit indifferently. "As for people, I want to ask you," said the king, "how can we make people better?" "I can tell you, sir," replied the hermit, "that laws by themselves are not at all sufficient to make people better. Man has to cultivate certain attitudes and practice certain methods in order to attain higher truth and clear understanding. This higher truth has, of course, very little to do with ordinary truth." The king was dubious. Then he reacted by replying, "What is certain, hermit, is that I, at least, can make people tell the truth. At least I can make them be truthful." The hermit smiled slightly, but said nothing. He kept a noble silence. The king decided to set up a gallows on the bridge that served as access to the city. A squadron under the command of a captain checked all those who entered the city. The following was announced: "Anyone who wants to enter the city will be questioned beforehand. If he tells the truth, he will be allowed to enter. If he lies, he will be taken to the gallows and hanged." Dawn was breaking. The hermit, after meditating all night, set out for the city. His beloved forest was behind him. He walked slowly. He advanced towards the bridge. The captain stood in his way and asked him, "Where are you going?" "I am on my way to the gallows so that you can hang me," the hermit replied calmly. The captain said, "I do not believe it." "Well, captain, if I have lied, hang me." "But if we hang you for lying," the captain replied, "we will have made what you have said true, and in that case we will not have hanged you for lying, but for telling the truth." "That is so," the hermit said. "Now you know what the truth is, your truth." The Master says, "Clinging to points of view is a mental fetter and a strong obstacle on the inner journey." The even mean man. He was a man who was loved by everyone. He lived in a village in the interior of India. He was a widow and had a son. He owned a horse, and one day he woke up in the morning and went to the stable to feed the horse, and found that it had run away. The news spread through the village, and the neighbors came to see him and said, "What bad luck you have had, for a horse that you owned has run away." "Yes, yes, that is right. It has run away," said the man. A few days went by, and one sunny morning when the man left his house, he found that not only was his horse at the door, but he had brought another one with him. The neighbors came to see him and said, "What good luck you have. Not only have you got your horse back, but now you have two." "Yes, yes, that is right," said the man. With 2 horses at his disposal, he could now go out riding with his son. Father and son often galloped side by side. But one day the son fell off his horse and broke his leg. When the neighbors came to see the man, they said, "What bad luck, really bad luck. If that second horse had not come, your son would have been all right." "Yes, yes, that is right," said the man calmly. A couple of weeks passed. War broke out. All the young men in the village were mobilized, except the boy with the broken leg. The neighbors came to see the man and exclaimed, "What good luck for you! Your son has been spared from the war." "Yes, yes, that is right," replied the calm man calmly. The master says, "For one who knows how to see the course of phenomenal existence, there is no greater good than firmness of mind and spirit." There was a man who had heard much about the beautiful and aromatic sandalwood, but had never had the opportunity to see it. A strong desire had arisen in him to know the precious sandalwood. To satisfy his purpose, he decided to write to all his friends and ask them for a piece of this kind of wood. He thought that someone would be kind enough to send it to him. So he began to write letters and letters for several days, always with the same request: "Please send me some sandalwood." But one day suddenly, while he was sitting thoughtfully before the paper, he chewed the pencil with which he had written so many letters, and suddenly he smelled the wood of the pencil and discovered that it was sandalwood. The master says, "If perception is dull, it breaks down on the appearances of things. If you hurt me." Parvati is one of the most loving, benevolent, and merciful goddesses in the Hindu pantheon. She is the consort of Shiva and is extremely compassionate. One day, one of her sons, Kartikeya, injured a cat with his claws. On his way home, he ran to his mother to kiss her. But as he approached the goddess's beautiful face, he noticed that she had a scratch on her cheek. "Mother," Kartikeya said, "there is a wound on your cheek. What has happened to you?" With her eyes of immense and deep night, the loving goddess looked at her beloved son. Her voice was melancholy and sweet when she explained, "It is a scratch made by your nails." "But mother," the young man said quickly, "I would never dare to harm you in the least. There is no being that I love as much as you, dear mother." A refreshing smile of dawn spread across the goddess' lips. "My son," she said, "have you forgotten that you scratched a cat this morning?" "Yes, mother," Kartikeya replied. "Well, my son, don't you know that nothing exists in this world except me? Am I not the entire creation? By scratching that cat, you were scratching myself," the master says. "By hurting, you hurt yourself. Whoever you hurt yourself." The fish and the turtle. It was dawn. The first rays of the sun were reflecting off the blue waters of the Arabian Sea. A turtle was coming out of its deep sleep and stretching on the beach. It opened its eyes and suddenly saw a fish sticking its head out of the water. When the fish noticed the turtle, it asked, "Friend turtle, I sense that there is wisdom in your heart, and I want to ask you a question. What is water?" The turtle did not answer immediately. She could not believe what the fish near her was asking her. When she realized that she was not sleeping and that the event was not part of a dream, she replied, "Friend fish, you were born in water. You are living in water, and in water you will find death. There is water around your body and water inside your body. You feed on what you find in water, and you reproduce in water. And you, foolish fish, ask me what water is." The master says, "Ignorant like that fish, you are born, live and die in the being and thanks to the being, and yet, like that fish that does not know the water in which it lives, you are ignorant of the reality in which you live." A bamboo cane for the foolishest. There was a prosperous kingdom in northern India. Its ruler had reached an advanced age. One day he called for a yogi who was living in deep meditation in the forest and said, "Pious man, your king wants you to take this bamboo pole and go around the kingdom with it. I will tell you what you must do. You will travel without stopping from city to city, from town to town, and from village to village. When you meet a person whom you consider to be the most foolish, you must give him this pole. Even though I do not recognize any other king than my true inner self, sir, I will do as you tell me to please you. I will set out at once." The yogi took the cane that the king had given him and set off quickly. He traveled tirelessly, his feet touching all the roads of India. He visited many places and met many people, but he did not find a single human being whom he considered the most foolish. A few months passed, and he returned to the king's palace. He heard that the king had fallen seriously ill, and he ran to his chambers. The doctors explained to the yogi that the king was on the threshold of death, and a fatal outcome was expected within minutes. The yogi approached the bedside of the dying man. In a broken but audible voice, the monarch lamented, "How unfortunate I am! How unfortunate! All my life I have accumulated enormous wealth, and what shall I do now to take it with me? I do not want to leave it. I do not want to leave it." The yogi handed the bamboo cane to the king. The master says, "You may be a monarch, but it is of no use if your attitude is that of a beggar. Only that which you accumulate within yourself belongs to you. There is no other treasure than love." The Dove and the Rose. The dawning light of day was beginning to dispel the darkness of a warm and beautiful night. A dove, fluttering and fluttering, entered a small and secluded temple in India. All the walls were adorned with mirrors, and in them was reflected the image of a rose that had been placed as an offering in the center of the altar. The dove, mistaking the images for the rose itself, rushed against them, crashing violently again and again against the glass walls of the temple, until, finally, its fragile body burst, and it found death. Then the body of the dove, still warm, fell right on the rose. The master says, "Do not aim at appearances, but at reality. Do not get lost in diversity, but establish yourself in unity." The gold bracelets. There was a woman who, by dint of an upright attitude and perseverance, had achieved great spiritual achievements. Although married, she always found time to connect with her primordial reality. Since childhood, she had worn crystal bracelets on her wrists. Life was inexorably fading away, like dew melting when the first rays of the sun appear. She was no longer young, and wrinkles left their indelible marks on her face. Isn't separation already present in every encounter? One day, her beloved husband was touched by the Lady of Death, and his body became as cold as the pebbles in the stream where he performed his ablutions. When the corpse was cremated, the woman took off her crystal bracelets and put on gold ones. The people of the village could not help but be surprised. Why did she change now? Why did she abandon the glass bangles and take up the gold ones at such a painful moment? Some people came to her house and asked her the reason for this. The woman let the visitors in. Slowly, with the peace of one who understands and accepts the course of events, she prepared a delicious spiced tea. While the guests sipped the steaming liquid, the woman said, "Why are you surprised? Before, my husband was as fragile as the glass bangles, but now he is strong and enduring as these gold bangles." The master says, "Who does the death of the body not touch? But that which really animates the body is vigorous and enduring." A yogi by the roadside. He was a wandering yogi who had made great progress in his inner life. He sat down by the side of the road and naturally fell into ecstasy. He was in such a high state of consciousness that he was oblivious to everything around him. After a while, a thief passed by, and seeing him, he said to himself, "I have no doubt that this man must be a thief who, after spending the whole night stealing, has now fallen asleep. I am going to rush away, lest a policeman come and arrest him, and catch me too." And he ran away. Not long after, a drunkard passed by. He staggered along and could hardly stand. He looked at the man sitting on the side of the road and thought, "This man is really drunk. He has drunk so much that he cannot even move," and he staggered away. Finally, a genuine spiritual seeker passed by, and seeing the yogi, sat down beside him, bowed down and kissed his feet. The master says, just as each one projects what he carries within. So the wise man recognizes the wise man. The drunk driver. A drunken man was driving his car at high speed on a winding road. Suddenly, he lost control of the car, went off the road and plunged into a stinking pool. Several people, seeing the accident, ran to the spot and helped the driver to his feet. He could not hide his drunkenness. And then one of his helpers said to him, "Haven't you read Naren Gupta's famous treatise on the harmful effects of alcohol?" And the drunken driver, still hiccuping, stammered, "I am Naren Gupta." The master says, "This is how the false guru acts. Every man a doctrine." He was an honest and good-hearted disciple, but his mind was still a play of light and shadow, and he had not yet regained the broad and conciliatory understanding of an unfettered mind. Since his motivation was sincere, he studied incessantly and compared creeds, philosophies, and doctrines. He really became very bewildered at the proliferation of so many teachings and spiritual paths. Thus, when he had the opportunity to meet his spiritual teacher, he said, "I am confused. Are there not too many religions, too many mystical paths, too many doctrines if there is one truth?" And the teacher replied firmly, "What are you saying, fool? Each man is a teaching, a doctrine." The teacher says, "Even if there are many paths, ultimately follow your own inner path." The distrustful husband. When they reached an advanced age, and after a life of daily joy and suffering at home, a married couple decided to renounce worldly life and devote the rest of their lives to meditation and pilgrimages to the most sacred shrines. On one occasion, on the way to a Himalayan temple, the husband saw a fabulous diamond on the path. He quickly placed one of his feet on the jewel to hide it, thinking that if his wife saw it, perhaps a feeling of greed would arise in her that could contaminate her mind and retard her mystical evolution. But the wife saw through her husband's trick, and in a calm and even voice said, "My dear, I would like to know why you have renounced the world if you still make a distinction between diamond and dust." The master says, "To him who has established himself in reality, gain and loss, victory and defeat are impostors, because he who sees with wisdom makes no distinction between one and the other." The monkeys. He was a spiritual aspirant with a lot of motivation, but his mind was very scattered. He heard from an outstanding mentor and did not hesitate to go to his home and say, "Respected master, forgive me for bothering you, but I would be very grateful if you could provide me with a topic for meditation, as I have decided to retire to the forest for a few weeks to meditate without stopping. I am pleased with your decision. Go to the forest and be with yourself. You can meditate on anything you like, except monkeys. Bring whatever you want to your mind, but do not think of monkeys." The disciple was very happy, saying, "How easy is the topic that the master has given me. Yes, really simple." He retired to a lush forest and arranged a hut for meditation. Weeks passed, and the aspirant ended the retreat. He returned to the mentor, who, upon seeing him, asked, "How did it go?" The aspirant sadly replied, "It was exhausting. I tried tirelessly to think of something other than monkeys, but the monkeys came and went in my mind without being able to stop them. In fact, there came a time when I thought only of monkeys." The master says, "The mind is both a friend and an enemy. It is a bad master, but a good ally. That is why it is necessary to learn to contain thought and to put the mind under the yoke of the will." A hermit at court. A sumptuous banquet was taking place at the royal court. Everything had been arranged in such a way that each person sat at the table according to his rank. The monarch had not yet arrived at the banquet when a very poorly dressed hermit appeared, whom everyone took for a beggar. Without a moment's hesitation, the hermit sat down in the most important place. This unusual behavior angered the prime minister, who harshly asked him, "Are you a vizier?" "My rank is higher than that of a vizier," replied the hermit. "Are you a prime minister?" "My rank is higher than that of a prime minister." The Prime Minister, enraged, demanded, "Are you the king himself? My rank is higher than the king." "Are you God?" the Prime Minister asked sharply. "My rank is higher than God." The Prime Minister was beside himself with a vociferous outburst. "Nothing is higher than God." And the hermit said very calmly, "Now you know my identity. That nothing is me. The Master says, beyond all categories and dualities, ego and concepts, is he who has freed his mind." Nasruddin visits India. The famous and contradictory Sufi figure Mullah Nasruddin visited India. He arrived in Calcutta and began to walk along one of its crowded streets. Suddenly, he saw a man squatting there selling what Nasruddin thought were sweets, but in fact, they were hot chilies. Nasruddin had a sweet tooth and bought a large quantity of the supposed sweets, ready to gorge himself. He was very happy, sat down in a park, and began to eat chilies by the mouthful. As soon as he bit into the first chili, he felt a fire in his palate. The sweets were so hot that the tip of his nose turned red, and he began to shed tears all the way to his feet. Nevertheless, Nasruddin continued to put the chilies in his mouth without stopping. He sneezed, cried, made faces of discomfort, but continued to devour the chilies. Amazed, a passerby approached him and said, "Friend, don't you know that chilies are only eaten in small quantities?" Barely able to speak, Nasruddin said, "My good man, believe me, I thought I was buying sweets." But Nasruddin kept eating the chilies. The passerby said, "Well, that's fine, but now you know that they are not sweet. Why do you keep eating them?" Coughing and sobbing, Nasruddin said, "Since I have invested my money in them, I am not going to throw them away." The Master says, "Do not be like Nasruddin. Take what is best for your inner evolution, and throw away what is unnecessary or harmful, even if you have invested years in it." Ignorance. They were two friends, not very bright. They had decided to go on a walk and sleep in a stable. They walked all day. At dusk they stayed, as planned, in a stable of which they had heard beforehand. They were very tired and slept soundly, but in the early morning the nightmare woke one of the friends. He shook his companion awake and said to him, "Go outside and tell me if it is light. See if the sun has risen." The man went out and saw that everything was very dark. He returned to the stable and explained, "Listen, it's so dark that I can't see if the sun has risen." "Don't be an idiot," exclaimed the companion. "Can't you turn on the flashlight and see if he has gone out?" The Master says, "This is how human beings often proceed in their spiritual search, without using correct discernment." The Old Man and the Child. They were an old man and a boy who traveled with a donkey from town to town. They came to a village, walking with the donkey, and as they passed by, a group of young men laughed at them, shouting, "Look at these two fools. They have a donkey, and instead of riding it, they both walk beside it." At least the old man could get on the donkey. Then the old man got on the donkey, and they continued their journey. They came to another village, and as they passed through it, some people were filled with indignation when they saw the old man on the donkey and the little boy walking beside him. They said, "It's unbelievable. What impudence! The old man sitting on the donkey and the poor little boy walking." As they left the village, the old man and the boy exchanged places. They continued on their way until they reached another village. When the people saw them, they exclaimed in shock, "This is truly intolerable. Have you ever seen anything like it? The boy riding the donkey and the poor old man walking beside him. What a shame!" So the old man and the boy shared the donkey. The faithful donkey now carried the bodies of both of them on its back. They passed a group of peasants and they began to shout, "Scoundrels! Have you no heart? You will burst the poor animal." The old man and the boy chose to carry the donkey on their shoulders. In this way they reached the next village. The people crowded around them. Amidst the laughter, the villagers mocked and shouted, "We have never seen such stupid people. They have a donkey, and instead of riding it, they carry it on their backs. This is really good. What a pair of fools! Suddenly, the donkey turned around, fell into a ravine, and died. The master says, if you listen to the opinions of others, you will end up dead like this donkey. Close your ears to the opinions of others. Let what others censure be indifferent to you. Listen only to the voice of your heart, and do not get lost in other people's opinions. The living liberated and the seeker. A spiritual seeker traveled to India in his quest to find and interview a true enlightened one, a Jivanmukta or living liberated one. He traveled for months across the country. He moved from the Himalayas to Cape Virgin, from the state of Maharashtra to Bengal. He traveled through mountains, dunes, deserts, cities, and villages. He gathered a lot of information and finally found, according to all accounts, a truly accomplished man. At last, he could carry out his long-awaited meeting. The cawing of crows broke the silence of a peaceful golden afternoon. The accomplished man sat under a leafy rhododendron tree, meditating. The visitor greeted him politely, sat down beside him, and asked, before you found accomplishment, did you get depressed? Yes, of course, sometimes, the Jivanmukta replied calmly. The seeker asked a second question. Tell me, now that you have become enlightened, do you sometimes get depressed? A slight, beautiful smile appeared on the Jivanmukta's lips. He looked into the interlocutor's eyes with his clear eyes and replied, yes, of course, sometimes, but I don't care anymore, and it doesn't concern me. The master says, when identification with your psychomental processes ceases, nothing can chain you or involve you anymore. You are like an empty bamboo through which universal energy freely circulates. The false teacher. He was a renowned teacher, one of those teachers who run after fame and like to accumulate more and more disciples. In a huge tent, he gathered several hundred disciples and followers. He stood up straight, put on his voice, and said, my beloved, listen to the voice of the one who knows. There was a great silence. You could have heard the hasty flight of a mosquito. You must never have relations with another man's wife. Never. You must also never drink alcohol or eat meat. One of the attendants dared to ask, the other day, weren't you the one hugging Jai's wife? Yes, I was, replied the master. Then another listener asked, didn't I see you the other night drinking in the tavern? That was me, the master replied. A third man asked the master, weren't you the one who was eating meat at the market the other day? Indeed, the master said. At this point, everyone in attendance became indignant and began to protest. So why do you ask us not to do what you do? And the false teacher replied, because I teach, but I do not practice. The master says, if you cannot find a true master to follow, become a master yourself. Ultimately, you are your disciple and your master. If I had a little more time, with some savings, a man from a village in India bought a young donkey. The person who sold it to him warned him about the amount of food he had to provide for it every day. But the new owner thought that this amount was excessive and began to reduce the donkey's food day by day. The donkey's food ration was so reduced that one day the poor animal was found dead. Then the man began to whimper and lament. What a misfortune! What a fate! If you had given me a little more time before you died, I would have succeeded in getting you used to not eating at all. The master says, some negligent and greedy spiritual seekers are like this man. They want to conquer wisdom without any spiritual training. Discover more stories from India on our Planet Alibro channel.